Hello, everybody. Welcome to Stand By for Adventure. This is John. Decided to do some more videos. I have like tons of ideas for things to do, and I hope these are all going to be useful to somebody. I'm kind of starting with some basics, and really I want to just try and get a few different videos up on the site as quickly as possible so that if somebody comes to visit, they can find something that they're interested in. So please forgive me if I'm posting a lot of content in these first few days. I just want to make sure there's something here so that people look at it and go, oh, okay, this is worth being subscribed to, and this guy's going to put out more content, and I am going to. I have tons of topics to talk about. What I wanted to talk about today, and I have a little piece of paper over here that I'm looking at, is, and in fact I should see if I'm even on screen. I am, good, okay. I wanted to talk about something that isn't really explained very much. Sorry, that's my cat wanting to go outside, so you will hear him tap at the window, and I may have to let him out. But something that isn't talked about very much in depth, but is mentioned often, and it's one of the reasons why role-playing games have become so popular in the last couple of decades, aside from the fact that all the people like me who were kids and played these games when we were younger are now adults and still found out that, hey, we like these games and want to play them and want to introduce our kids to them and want to get them to play. And now all those kids are growing up to be geeks, which is what we all wanted to have, was more geeks when we were kids, people to play games with and do things with. And it turns out you can also play games as an adult, and what happens is your focus and what the stories you're telling change. However, if you have kids who are interested in gaming because their friends have infected them, or you have taught your kids, that's probably not really correct in this case. It would have to be somebody else teaching your kids, and you are a parent who is interested in finding out what the hell are role-playing games? Why should I trust that they're not demonic, like they used to say in the 80s? And I just want to give some history on that and give you a real quick rundown of the things that I have found over 40 years of gaming, growing up with it, almost growing up with the entire hobby, because I started gaming within a decade of its creation. And in fact, I grew up in Burlington, Wisconsin, which is only 10 miles down the road from Lake Geneva, which is where Dungeons & Dragons was born. And Dungeons & Dragons, nominally, I think it's somewhat fair to say, is probably the first role-playing game, although there's obviously a lot of discussion that could go on around that, because people have been telling stories forever. D&D just put rules to it, and the origin of the game was really not all that concerned about all the other things that would grow out of role-playing that are positive. All they wanted to know is, hey, I've got all these figures on the board, I want to know what this guy is doing. Like, I want to find out more about him. And that's where it came from. And I say this, having known Gary Gygax. I've met him, I did business with him years ago. I thought he was a very nice guy, and I'm sure, like anybody, he has his own strange little picadillos, and I'm sure people have talked about plenty of those. But I thought he was a very nice guy, and I owe so much of my life to him, or to his creation. So let's go through. Your kid's starting to play D&D. Is it safe? Yes, 100%. Absolutely, it's safe. There is, I mean, they could step on a sharp die, so that is one thing. By the way, if you don't know, the singular version of dice is die. So if you ever people say the word die, it probably has to do with an individual dice. Individual die. I can't even say it right. So I'm going to run through the 11 things that I came up with off the top of my head as positive aspects that kids and anyone, kids or adults, can learn from role-playing games. And I'll go through them just one at a time right now. They learn how to socialize. They learn math skills. Basic math, typically. There are games that there's much more involved math. Critical thinking skills. How to approach a problem, how to solve a problem. Teaches morality and ethics, Sometimes, not necessarily, but it can, and it absolutely does in most cases, because in most cases you play good characters. Um, you get to explore different identities. Something that, especially as kids, we like to do. We like to play. We like to pretend to be other people, and that never stops. You are a different person to your mother than you are to your father, than you are to your brother, than you are to your kids, than you are to strangers on the street. Right? We all are playing different roles all the time. They all just happen to actually be us in these different environments. In a role playing game, that doesn't have to be true anymore. We can explore different ideas, like what happens when I do this or that or the other thing, and what are the ramifications of that. Um, Explorations of problem solving, so different ways to find solutions to problems that are relatively consequence free, um, because it all happens in our imagination or at the tabletop. Maybe a character gets killed. Character is very different than player. Character is a piece of paper and an idea you have in your head. That's it. That's Nobody actually dies at the role playing table unless something has gone horribly, horribly wrong, and that is not the fault of the role playing game. Um, Teaches problem solving, teaches wisdom. So as you are learning these ways to solve problems, you figure out, like, oh, this works better than that to get these things done. And in some cases, it's just learning how to play the game. That's all the lesson is teaching you. But sometimes it's how to get along in the real world and how to suggest ideas that are positive and beneficial to everyone, and solve whatever problem you're looking at. It teaches storytelling, something that, I mean, I personally think we only exist to tell stories and communicate with others. And role playing games are a living story that you and your friends create together, and there's nothing else like it. It is so much fun, and you never know what's coming next, even though you're sitting at the table participating in this ongoing play, like a theatrical play, even though you're not a professional actor. I mean, it's all just in your imagination. So when your friend says something, you kind of have to imagine, oh, Sarah's playing a dwarf. So this isn't Sarah saying it. This is her dwarven character, Gord Runehammer. And you just have to, like, you propagate that story throughout the entire time you're playing and amongst all the players, and it just becomes so much fun to be able to help create something like that. It's a good time. Teaches improvisation, something that has become really popular in the last however many decades. I took improv classes years ago. I'm a big comedy fan, and I'm sure that grew out of my love of role-playing games because there's so much improvisation and storytelling. You are literally making things up on the spot. Maybe you or the GM, whether you're GM or player actually, but if you as the GM, you might have some idea of where you want to go with a story, but you don't know for sure until the players start interacting with that story, and you have to be able to adapt to all of that. And I'll cover that in an upcoming episode of this too. Um, it encourages creativity away from the table. And I'm sure you're all well aware of this at this point, although I don't think role playing games are directly credited for this. They ought to be. You'll see things like fan art, or for something like Critical Role, or just art. Like, I have a character and I want to. I have some skill as an artist. I don't personally, but I have this really awesome elven character and I want to draw up a picture of them, and so I work really hard to be a better artist, and I draw and I draw and I draw and I draw. And that's fantastic. Like, to be able to have that sort of uh, inspiration come out of a tabletop game that you are helping to create with your friends, and it drives you to express that in another way. Maybe it's music, maybe it's poetry, maybe you write stories about your character, or you build a role-playing world, or anything, right? Anything to get you involved in any sort of creativity. And I think role-playing games should get more credit for that. And then, cat. And then the last thing I have on my list for things that it does for players is, and as you as a parent, is if a kid is somewhere playing a role playing game, or your partner, if you're a wife or husband or partner to somebody who is a role player, or their kid is a role player, your kid is a role player, you generally don't have to be worried about what your kids are getting into if they're over at their friend's house playing a game with 4 or 5 other people, because the game really takes over that whole social setting. Um, and I'll go into more detail on this, but you're going to know where they are, you're going to know what they're doing, and if they're at your house, you get to control if they have alcohol or drugs, you get to control what sort of foods they're eating, you get to control the environment that they're in, you can hear if they're there, if they're having a good time, if they're laughing, if they're yelling at each other. You will be amazed at how well behaved and yet also how crazy kids can be playing a role playing game, and you can feel 100% confident that there is nothing necessarily bad going on. They're just kids playing a game, doing something they love, and it's fantastic. Give you those are the quick overviews, and I'll go into a little bit more depth on all of them. To give you a little history on me, I grew up, like I said, in Burlington, Wisconsin. My friend Dave Bradier introduced me to role-playing games in 1982. And this was, 6 or 8 years, I think 8 years after role-playing was invented, just a few miles away from me. He got me into it through board games, so we started playing things like, and this was back when there were not tons and tons of board games. We would play things like Life and Monopoly and, whatever else that we could find, and then one day he was like, hey, and I'm sure he was working up to this, I've got this other game that I started playing with my friend Arthur, and I want to know if you wanted to try it with us. We're going to play this Saturday. Sure enough, I went over and played, and I wrote up Estelo, my halfling thief, and I don't remember anything. No, I do remember. We were playing there was an old adventure series against the slave pit masters, something like that. So the bad guys were slavers. Hey, what do you know? Moral lesson. But man, once I started playing, I was in. That was it. I loved it. I loved the storytelling aspect. I loved making up everything with all my friends. We had such a good time, and then even as you're making up the story, you don't know exactly how it's going to go because you roll dice to determine if you successfully climb over the wall or if you hit somebody in a combat and manage to kill them before they kill you. It's all just like you have to keep reacting to things, and yet you're reacting to things that are dangerous in-game, but at the table you're just sitting there having a good time. It's just fun. It's like playing through a movie or a TV show at the best of times, and at the worst of times it's just playing a game. And games tend to be fun. That's why we do them. So that's kind of where I started. From there, my friend Dave and I actually played, and I think back on this now and it's absolutely insane. Honestly, hand to God, swear on a stack of whatever you want to give me, we played, just the two of us, every single day after school for hours, every weekend day for hours and hours and hours, and that maintained through all of high school. So from the time I was 12 through the time I was 17 and moved out of the house to go to college. When I went to college, I then found gaming groups there that allowed me to play on Thursday night, Friday night, and all day Saturday. And that's what I did all during college. So, when I say the first thing is you learn socialization, take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, because my socialization got completely overtaken by role-playing games, and I loved it, don't get me wrong, but it certainly didn't do much for my dating life. Now, however, that may not be quite as big of a deal because when I was gaming, I didn't game with a woman until I was in college, and that was fine because I didn't really have all that many people to game with anyway. It was very new as well, and it was considered evil and geeky and lame, and who cares? I didn't care. Now there are so many people from so many different walks of life, male, female, trans, anything, that you can find anybody at the gaming table, and that only helps to socialize you to not only be able to talk to anybody, but also to accept anyone for who they are, because you know you trust that person at the table and they are only doing exactly what they want to do with their time in their life, and you will develop lifelong friends sitting around a gaming table. I game with people that I have been gaming with for literally over 30 years from when I started college. One of the guys who was on my freshman year dorm floor, I play with 2 games a week. And we just hooked up again like 6 months ago because it was during the pandemic and I was saying online how I wanted to play more games. And he said, hey, I've got some games. And that's all. That's it. We play games together, and that's what we do. And it's fantastic. We have a blast. So that's a socialization aspect. And as I was sort of starting to allude to earlier, I think the geekiness and lameness of a lot of role-playing has gone out the window because it is so popular now. And you can have a very fantastic time playing games, meeting people, talking to people, dating people that you meet at the game table. Not necessarily recommended. It's a lot like dating somebody you work with, because you have scheduled time to be together. Excuse me. You have scheduled time to be together, and you don't want things to go bad. But socialization, very important. It takes a lot of pressure off of you to like say or do the right thing because you're in a completely imaginary setting. Somebody sets up some ridiculous thing. You're on an invisible bridge that crosses over a gorge into another land, and there are people on the other side who are trying to kill you, and you have to negotiate your way out of that. It could be anything. You just need to figure out what to do, and you're all socializing together to solve these problems. Socialization, so fantastic in role-playing games, and like I said, you'll develop lifelong friends, and you'll always have something to talk about and do together. I really consider role-playing games structured play, and that's all it is. And so many of our games are structured play. Look at Cops and Robbers, or hide and seek, or any game, right? You set out some rules. These are the certain things you have to follow, and that becomes the structure for how we socialize. And that's all a role-playing game is. The next point was math skills. There's a lot of math, and in some games there is a ton of math, some of it quite advanced. In the old days, they kind of really ran the gamut between really super realistic, trying to represent reality in a game, to very abstracted, and you just kind of have to go with it. And these days, things aren't very much on that first part. People aren't really concentrating on the realism, making sure everything is accurate. There's not a ton of math in most things. In D&D, really the worst math you'll find, the most complicated math you'll find is either having something and knowing if you round up or round down, multiplying by 1.5 and knowing if you round up or round down, and the one piece of math that is not covered at all, and it probably should be, is how to figure out an angle and how much distance this is if you are working on a flat map, but your character is up 20 feet in the air, what is this distance? Because that will make a difference in terms of the range that you have to fire a weapon. That's the most complicated math that you might run into, and most people just hand wave it anyway because it's going to be the difference of 5 or 10 feet in the most extreme of cases. But the math is good because it's the grounding of math. It's the simple level of math, especially if you're getting kids who are younger playing and maybe they still have some issues with math or adding quickly. You're rolling a d20, which has 20 sides, and you add that to a number that runs anywhere from, I'll say, -2 incredibly unrarely, or incredibly rarely, that you would that you would have something have a -2 modifier, to plus, at higher levels you could have plus 15, 20 to a roll, something like that. That wouldn't be unreasonable, but that would be pretty far along in a game, like where your characters are pretty advanced. But every single time you roll a die, a d20, you roll d20, okay, I get a 7 plus 5. Okay, because I've been a gamer forever, I just automatically know that's 12. I don't even have to do the math in my head. 7 plus 5, 12. 8 plus 4, 12. 6 plus 3, 13. It's not even, I'm not even doing the math. And that's just because I've rolled so many dice and added those numbers so often. It goes incredibly quickly. Same thing if you roll a bunch of 6-sided die, which are the normal cube-shaped dice that you see. I can add those up in no time because I just look to add tens. So 6 and 4, 5 and 5, 7. Well, 7 and 3 won't work, but that's all I do. 3, 3, 3, 1. There, that's a 10. And then just add those numbers together. It takes me a second to add up to 35. Like, no problem. You learn averages. So talking about something like the rolling number of 6-sided dice, the average of 10d6 is 35. 3.5 on each die times 10, 35. And you can figure that out for every single die. The average on an 8-sided die is 4.5. The average on a 4-sided die is 2.5. The average of a 10-sided die is 5.5. The average of a d20 is 10.5. And you get into all these different things and you start to understand on a more instinctual level the chances of things happening when you need, and because that also helps in the game to plan out what you want to do to sort of optimize your actions. Very much leading into the next topic I was going to talk about, at least I'm pretty sure, yes, which is critical thinking skills. Your GM or DM, meaning game master, dungeon master, sometimes it's a moderator, director. There's all sorts of different terms for it. People have generally over time tried to steer away from the master term, just because it's masculine and hierarchical. Because the GM, I use that term just because it's stuck in my head over years and years and years. But whoever the moderator is, GM or DM, whatever you want to call it, they are trying to present you, they're not your enemy, right? They are trying to present you with a set of circumstances for you to react to as your character and then see how that plays out. And usually those things you have to worry about in game are pretty straightforward. You don't really, it's not necessarily dangerous or there's not weird options, but sometimes you will run into situations where you have to figure out, okay, wait a minute, we need to sneak inside to steal this thing back from an evil wizard, but we're in the middle of a city, we might get spotted by the guard, we know what we're doing is the right thing, they're just trying to enforce the law, but this guy's trying to end the world. How do we deal with that and still come out not getting arrested, not being killed, not ending the game, right? So it's lots of critical thinking skills, and it even comes down to that when you're talking about building your characters, because there are so many options while building characters that you need to figure out what is optimal for me. What am I looking to get out of this character? What do I want it to do? That's why we read all these books that are, this thick, and a nice quality paper, so the pages are even thinner. So this is this is an adventure that I haven't read, but this is over 250 pages long, and people will devour these books in order to find the rules to make things that they want to play, to give them more options, to make the game more fun, to make their character possibly more powerful, or just flat out more interesting and flavorful. Um, it's fantastic for learning critical thinking skills because you are always asking the next question. You're always saying why, or what will happen, or who, or who's the person in charge. You are always having to think about how to solve whatever puzzle is put in front of you, and that's really all this is. Because it's not like a novel, it's not a book, it's not pre-written. You are finding your way through the situation that the GM has set up for you, and that obviously gets you thinking. And not only that, you have a table full of people that you're working with, so it's not just your critical thinking, it's group critical thinking, and it's giving you the skills to be able to work with a group of people to achieve an end that you possibly couldn't do individually. It's a fantastic skill to learn. And I think we, just as a society, could be vastly improved by everybody playing role-playing games and sort of getting that idea in their head, like, oh, okay, if we all work towards the same thing on this small scale, holy cow, it's fun. It's easy to apply that to everything. And it's just fantastic. And if you haven't played yourself, I highly recommend it. Critical thinking skills, it teaches morality and ethics. I won't go too much into this because it really depends on your GM or the story that they're telling. One of the things that's cool about this adventure, which is the one I just held up, D&D put out this adventure, The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, is they specifically created this adventure so that you can get through every single encounter without combat. That's very new to D&D. Other games do this frequently. There are all sorts of different types of games out there that are very experimental and interesting. But in D&D, it started as a combat game, and so combat has been such a big part of it for so long, and that's probably one of the largest sections of the rules, that it's just intrinsic to it. And so to come out with an adventure that you could actually just talk your way through if you wanted to, if your character's an atheist, make sure the rest of the players are on board with that, because maybe they want to have fights and do all that sort of stuff. But you could do it. You can walk your way through this and talk your way through this, and it's entirely possible. So again, if a story is presented to you in a way that you are supposed to be the good guys, you are supposed to be the heroes, and a good example of this really is the Vox Machina characters. And despite all their, and I encourage you to check out, if not the streams of their campaigns, which is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours, check out the cartoon on Amazon Prime. It's adult, but when you watch that cartoon, and I do recommend it if your kids are getting into gaming and you want to see the sorts of things that they're going to be doing, that's a really good example. It's adult, so the people are swearing and saying things, but you'll get a kick out of that because it's not insulting your intelligence, and the characters and the players are presented with situations that turn them into heroes. They know what the bad guys are doing is wrong, and they cannot allow it. And they do something about it, and that's a good thing, right? There are certainly some games, and players all go through this phase where they want to play bad guys. It just is automatic. People want to be able to explore that reality as well. And it's fun because one of the things about heroes typically is they are reactive. And so if something goes wrong, the heroes respond. That's just how it goes. Because you can't react to something, you can't fix something until something goes wrong. The bad guys get to make things go wrong. They get to do things. They get to mess everything up and make everything go horribly wrong. And for some players, that's fun. It is, however, a really tricky change to do in a role-playing game because you can't have a party where everybody's trying to kill each other because they're all working at cross purposes to get things done. It's so much better to have everybody working towards a similar goal, and that doesn't work quite so well in an evil game. And so we tend to play games in which characters are at least neutral to very, very good. And that's if you disagree, do let me know if you're an experienced gamer and you find that not to be true. But I have always found that to be true. All the published adventures, you are assumed to be righting some wrong or trying to prevent some evil from happening in the world, and it's just like any mythology, right? It's teaching us to be good, positive people, to be helpful, to be heroic. Um, So that's the morality and ethics part of things. Again, if it's sometimes it's confused, especially for new GMs who don't have really complex stories in mind, or are just playing the game as a game where you're moving guys around on a board and you're just killing people and rolling dice, and that's fine. Eventually, you will move on to realizing that some of the most fun you can get is in the role-playing side of things when people and characters do things that are completely unexpected and really are just so much fun to see happen at the table. Exploring identities was the next one, and I've touched on this a little bit. But you can play anything. You can play anything, and I think it's one of the reasons why role-playing games are such a powerful medium, because it allows somebody who's, for instance, like myself, who's cis, straight male, middle America, middle class. I can explore anything. I can play a poor half-orc who's been abused his entire life, and it's just my story, right? I can't actually understand that, but I can come up with a story that I am able to play out, like, this is how I feel like I would react, and this is how people react to me in game because I'm a half-orc. People look down on me. I'm not considered as good as anybody else in my town full of humans, despite the fact that my mother raised me as her own, and I was or whatever, she died and I was raised by an uncle who hated me. It doesn't matter. You can come up with anything because it's make-believe. And it allows people to explore different aspects of their personality and see what they want to do. I know of a lot of people who are gay or trans or bi or queer in some way who love role-playing games because it allowed them at a young age to be able to explore their own personal reality of how they felt and let them play with the expectations of how they exist in the world, in this case in the role-playing world, to get more comfortable with themselves and realize, no, I do like this and this is who I want to be, and they can make adjustments in their own real life to be more like what they want to be, and it allowed them a safe place to explore those attitudes, and I think it's a fantastic thing. So it allows you to do all of that, and it also allows you not only to explore identities for yourself, but to explore story ideas that you might have, or you want to see how this type of character gets along in the world. Even if you have no interest in actually being that person, it might be interesting to see what it's like to be an imperious jerk and see how everybody treats you. Because that's an important lesson in and of itself. And even if your other people at the table decide to just let it slide and they get along with you and forgive all your foibles or your character's foibles, maybe the GM and the rest of the world are not going to let that go, because you have specifically created a character that says, I'm going to be difficult. And the GM should take that information and say, oh, that player wants me to respond as if his or her character is difficult, and that's going to be part of the drama of that character, part of the interest of that character. So don't let that stuff pass. Just make it clear with your GM and make it clear with your players. When you give me a character, I'm going to give you what you're asking me for. So Peter Parker has Aunt May. I am going to, as a GM, I am going to put Aunt May in peril because she's important to you. That's what you're giving me as a player. And that's exactly why Stan Lee and Ditko created Spider-Man the way he did, with Aunt May, with MJ eventually, with Flash, with all sorts of different characters, Betty Brant, was because there needs to be other things to hold on to and react to in the world, and the GM is in charge of everything except your character. And that's just how it works. So, exploring identities. Exploration of problem solving, I talked earlier when talking about socialization and critical thinking. I think that all is answered already. You get to see, how can I solve this problem? This worked last time, I'll try that again. This didn't work last time, I'll try something else, etc., etc. Working with your group of people to come up with solutions, finding out what's the best thing, deciding who gets to decide on exactly how to do things, who gets to make the roles to do things. There's just all sorts of communication and teamwork, and or at least it should be teamwork, that comes together at the role-playing table that doesn't exist in really any other sort of play. And there are still disagreements, right, over the rules, like how does this apply, how does that apply, did you touch me in playing tag, you didn't touch me, yes I did, no you didn't, yes I did. The rules are there to try and smooth over some of that, and the GM or the moderator, the DM, is the end word. And there's all sorts of people who give advice on how to handle rules discussions at the table. My advice is, if within 30 seconds you can find the rule that contradicts what was just said, then fine, go along with what the rules say. Ultimately, even in that case, it's up to the GM on how they want to tell the story and have things proceed, because they have the entire picture in mind. And it's their game. They get to say what happens. They might have their own house rules, which is rules that they've made up that they want everybody to play under. And as long as you as a player have agreed to them, that's part of the social contract. The GM is the one in charge. Or is the final arbitrator, is really what I should say. They're not really in charge. You're all in charge, because you're all in charge of different aspects of the game. They are the final moderator of the game. Teaches wisdom. And again, this comes down to solving problems, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and that sort of thing. Shows you that it is easier to get help with, what is it? You attract more flies with honey than with vinegar. And that's true. You learn all of those things that TV and movies and books and people try to teach you all the time. But in this case, you are actively participating in learning those things because, oh, hey, maybe it wasn't smart for a group of beginning characters to try and kill a dragon. Ha, what do you know? We all died. You will quickly learn that is not a thing you want to do. That's a pretty obvious lesson, but there are tons of other lessons that happen all the time. Maybe my rogue, who I wrote up because I wanted to try and steal things from everybody, shouldn't actually try to steal from everyone all the time, because it will, one, completely sidetrack the game as your rogue gets in trouble, and two, it serves no purpose other than just introducing chaos. Um, it's especially offensive when a rogue steals from the other party members and the other party members are not okay with that. It will quickly degenerate into fights in character, killing characters in character, being pissed off at each other at the table. It's a good way to break up a friendship, a great gaming group, and a good time. Just be careful with the choices you make, because you are not operating in a vacuum. You have a table full of people. Even if the table full is only you and the GM still is there to have fun, just like all of you, as are all the other players around the table, and you have to take that into account when you are playing your character. So, teaches wisdom. I honestly think that's true. Storytelling. All of this is storytelling. Even if you're just playing the game as moving guys around on the board to kill people, you are still telling a story, and afterwards you can reflect back and talk about with your friends, like, oh, wasn't it awesome when I moved up and that guy didn't see me and I got behind the Medusa and stabbed her in the back and she went down and we thought we were going to die, and Bill's character had already been turned to stone, but then we figured out how to turn him back. And like, even if it was just moving guys around on the board and there was no talking in play, or like in character discussion of things, it's still like you all participated in your own movie or your own comic book or your own book story. I mean, it is a story, and everyone gets better at telling their part of the story from their character's perspective, and the GM also learns over time how to throw curveballs at people and how to make unexpected things happen that the players will be surprised by. The players themselves will be surprised by, and the characters that they control have to react to in a way that makes sense, that they weren't thinking they were going to have to deal with. And the storytelling just gets better and better and better and better as time goes on, which I think is also why we have seen the popularity of role-playing games increase so much in recent years, is because not only has the audience and the players and GMs become better, not only have they become better storytellers, the games themselves and all the variety of games allows for different types of storytelling. If you want to play Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and yes, that's a game that came out recently, you can do that. I actually need to get a copy of the game because I don't know anything about it other than the title and that it has a fantastic art style. But there are so many different games out there that will allow you to play any sort of setting or genre that you want. If you and your friends are big fans of like Coen brother movies, like Hudsucker Proxy or the one in the Northwoods, Fargo. Check out Fiasco, which is a fantastic, very sort of free-form role-playing game that you would never expect to be as so cool and interesting and innovative as it is, and it is really fantastic. I know years ago, Will Wheaton and John Rogers and a few other people played on the Geek and Sundry YouTube channel a game of Fiasco, and it was a lot of fun. John Rogers is the showrunner behind Leverage, and he just wrote and produced the Jennifer Lopez "Marry Me" movie, and Owen Wilson. And I've worked with him in the past on the DC Comics role-playing game that we did at Green Renine, because he had created the newest version of Blue Beetle, the Jamie Reyes character, or Jaime, I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced. Actually, I'm sure it's probably Jaime now that I think about it. But that game is so cool because it's a game of basically poor impulse control. So you are playing super flawed, really unwise characters, and the goal is to just play out an interesting story like the Coen brothers might come up with. It's a great game. So storytelling and getting better at storytelling and being able to hold a plot line in your head and remember things, and that's also certainly a thing that you learn with role playing is you need to remember things. You need to take notes on things. You need to be able to refer back to things, remember what was happening last time, remember what the overall plot was, remember who the bad guys are, remember who the good guys are. There's a ton of information. It's just like reading a book. You get so many different characters that come your way. You have to be on top of your game when it comes to keeping track of those things and telling a consistent and compelling story. It teaches improvisation. Again, that just plays into the storytelling aspect of things. It is a skill to be able to think fast on your feet, to be able to come up with answers quickly. I am doing this right now. I have done every video on here so far. There have been this one and 2 others, so 3 videos. I haven't written down any of what I'm saying. I literally, I'll show you my notes. I am extemporaneizing, I can't say the word, extemporaneously coming up with all of this content that I am saying right now based on the words you see on your screen right now. So this is literally socialization, math skills, critical thinking. That's all those are my notes for this probably hour of talking that I'm doing. And it's because I know what I want to say. It's just here in my head, and I just have to organize it as it comes out. And I'm so used to doing that at a gaming table that I'm able to do it very naturally. At least I hope it seems very natural and fluid, and that you are able to follow along, because that's my goal. So yes, it teaches improvisation. It teaches the ability to be funny. That's not really important, but when you're playing a game with your friends, you want to be having a good time, and being funny is a good way to do that. And in fact, a lot of role-playing games give some kind of benefit to players who are able to make the table laugh or make the GM laugh or do something unusual or funny or entertaining, because the point of the game is to have a good time. It also allows you to sort of improvise speeches. Obviously, that's maybe not as good as some English teachers might want you to do in terms of coming up with a speech where you'd want to research things and write things out. But the ability to improvise and come up with something off the top of your head is a skill that will pay off throughout your entire life, because you will find yourself less flat-footed and less tongue-tied than if you hadn't been sitting around a table for hours and hours and hours over the course of years and years and years, learning how to just say something that makes sense for the situation, because you do it all the time in game in situations that are completely outside the realm of reality. And so then when you're faced with something in reality, it's that much easier to come up with something. It just, like, it's not it's like, oh, okay, I have to have an answer to this. So easy. And it's very powerful, because if you're able to improvise, you're able to be creative, you're able to then do more creative things, and maybe that will inspire you to do things like art or music or writing or poetry or record videos or whatever. It could be anything. And that leads into the next thing: encourages creativity away from the table. I think this makes absolute sense to anybody who's seen a convention, right? If you've gone to a gaming convention, you've seen people selling artwork, you've seen people selling costumes. So they make those costumes. Even the people walking around in their costumes. That's an aspect of fandom that I personally, it's not my thing. I think it's absolutely incredible, some of the costumes that these people make. Stunning. And there's 100% an opportunity to turn that passion into a career in movies and TV and online. Go to Etsy. I make bars of soap. I make candles. I make jewelry. And there's so much of that stuff that is gaming related now because people are passionate about it and they want to make that stuff. They want to do things. And when you have a passion like gaming, there are outlets you would not believe. There are so many authors these days who have started their, creators of all types who have started their careers really in gaming. Brandon Sanderson was a gamer. Well-known gamer is the other guy that I can't think of who does great stuff. He's super nice. Big Patrick Rothfuss. He's a big gamer. George R. Martin was a gamer. He started not Game of Thrones, but the Wild Card series of novels, which is going to be a TV series. 30 years ago, because he and his friends were playing in GURPS, which is another role-playing game. They were playing in a GURPS Superheroes game, or maybe it was Super World. It was an old superhero game. And they wanted to use those characters in fiction. And so that's how the whole series of 20-some books started. That is also fantastic. I love that people take their passion about gaming and turn it into something real in the world. They literally change the world to put more of their gaming passion into it. And then, like I said, lastly, the thing that I think is really important for you if you're a parent whose kids are getting into gaming, you're going to know where your kids are. They're going to be safe. They're going to be doing something that you're hopefully okay with. If you want to find out what gaming is in terms of what they actually do at the table, what I don't recommend is watching them as they're gaming, not actively. Like maybe if they're over there at the table and you're sitting on the couch, listen in, but don't make them feel uncomfortable or like they're being judged or like you're gonna take it away from them if they don't do it right or something, because they won't do it right and they're going to make mistakes and they're going to do things you disagree with, but they're doing all of that at a kitchen table or on some couches and chairs or on the carpet in the den or gaming room. They're not out doing stupid things in the street, drinking whatever. I mean, they're safe at a home, whether it's your home or a friend's home, gathered around a table, and the worst thing they have to worry about is if they run out of soda and chips and if the bathroom smells. That's it. Like, because somebody just went. Like, that's all they need to worry about, and that's all you need to worry about them worrying about. It's a very safe hobby. I should also mention painting and sculpting miniatures. I have friends who support themselves painting and sculpting miniatures, which is another sort of real-world aspect of gaming. But yeah, it's a very safe way for your kids to spend time. The way I used to explain it is it's basically a safer version of people going out to play cards. Which was definitely like my mom's generation's thing. They would play whatever, bridge or hearts or something like that, cribbage, and they could do it for hours and hours, and it was just structured social time. That's all card playing is. That's all gaming is. That's all role-playing gaming is. It's structured social time, and if the structure is we sit around a table, roll dice, and move little plastic people around on a battle map, that's really safe compared to what else they could be doing outside the house, and it has so many more payoffs. It's just such a great hobby. So I've had this page here this whole time, and I forgot to mention it at the beginning, so there, my improvisation was off a little bit. But Drive-Thru RPG, I wanted to point out, currently, this is March 4th, so this weekend. March 4th is Gary Gygax's birthday, and so every March 4th we celebrate game masters and Gary Gygax, and the fact that we celebrate. This is a thing that has sort of come about in the last however many years. Gygax died in 2008, and this is just a way to remember him. And this website is fantastic. Drive-Thru RPG is actually owned by one of the guys who ran White Wolf Publishing, who did the Vampire the Masquerade and a bunch of other games, the storytelling games back in the day. And it's a great site. There are certainly things about it that could improve. I know they know that already. I'm not going to harsh on them at all for that. This is where you can go, or your kids can go, to find almost any gaming product in PDF form. They are able to purchase it and put it into their library on the website. It keeps track of it. And I just wanted to point it out. So if you are looking for games, and if you are looking for different sorts of games, Drive-Thru RPG is a great place to go and look at things. They have these daily deals right there. And it does in fact change every day. You can see this is the GM's Day information, and they have deals on all sorts of game mastering stuff. So you can get, let's take a look at this. Yeah, so you can get bundles of things, so Let the GM Play Too. So this is a collection of games that don't require a game master. They're just games, but they're still role-playing or other sorts of games. GMing Into the Wild, so resources for game masters who want to run games out in the wilderness, as opposed to a city, as opposed to a dungeon. GM Starter Pack, so this is a good bundle for a new gamer, or somebody who has a new gamer in their life and they want to learn more about gaming. This will give you tips on how to be a better game master, and you will quickly see there's nothing evil about any of this stuff. It's all just tips on basically how to better tell a story with your friends around a table. That's it. GMing in Space is another, and there's more. There's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of titles on here. I have nearly 2,000 titles in my own library on this website because I've been purchasing things from them for years. But it's a fantastic website. You should check it out if you're looking for either a new game. You can also do print on demand for a lot of their titles, and you will get a very nice quality book. I have showed off the book that I printed there in previous videos, and it's perfect bound if you have any knowledge of how printing works. And it's 32 pages. It's fantastic quality printing on this stuff. This is, I think, the higher quality, but I love the color inside. This is all print on demand. So if somebody wants to buy this book, they order it on the website. It goes to their printer that they either own or work with exclusively. They print out the book. They send it out to you. All done. That's it. I don't need to have a warehouse full of things. You don't need to worry about somebody trashing a bunch of books that don't get sold. It's really fantastic. It's an amazing service, and I absolutely love it. If you have any questions about a new gamer in your life, if you have any questions or concerns about what they're doing at the table, if the game is evil and demonic, it's absolutely not. It's just like reading a novel that doesn't exist. That's the best. Improvisational radio theater is the other good explanation I've heard of it. So if you've ever been to a play, you have seen what a role-playing game is, because it's the exact same thing, except that there is no written out script other than what's in the GM's head, and they don't even know where things are going to go, because all they do is set up a situation and the players react to it. That's it. I hope that's been useful to everybody. I hope you stuck around for this whole thing, because there is a lot of good that comes out of role-playing games, and obviously it's a big passion for a lot of people, and I hope it continues to be. I am a lifelong gamer, and I absolutely love it, which is why I started this channel. So, hey, stand by for adventure, and we'll be back next time with something new to talk about. I've got some topics coming up about starting out as a GM, being a good player, being a good GM, I've got other topics also in the hopper that I'm going to do. I'll probably do maybe one or two more of these this week just because I have time. And like I said, I want to build up a library of information for people. Have yourself a good day. Bye-bye.